On a wide stretch of land where the horizon seemed endless and the wind carried whispers of both past and present, a man named Samuel lived alone. He had once known laughter, companionship, and the sound of children's feet running across wooden floors. But time had stripped him of those joys. Years had gone by with only the cattle, the dust, and his memories to keep him company. His ranch sat like a forgotten outpost of resilience, far from the nearest town, and Samuel had grown used to the silence that settled heavy each evening, when the sun sank behind the hills. But silence has a way of holding both comfort and torment. Each night, Samuel would sit on his porch, listening to coyotes in the distance, wondering if his solitude was punishment or protection. His heart, though hardened by time, still yearned for a connection, something or someone to remind him that he was not just a shadow on the earth, but a man still living with purpose. He didn't know that fate was about to send him a test unlike any he had ever faced. It was late one evening when the unexpected arrived. Samuel heard the rhythmic thunder of hooves before he saw them, 10 riders cresting the hill as the sun bled into the horizon. Their presence was commanding, their silhouettes sharp against the orange glow of twilight. As they drew closer, Samuel recognized the figures as native warriors, proud and stoic, carrying the weight of their heritage in every movement. He felt his chest tighten with both caution and curiosity. These men were not wanderers passing by. They carried themselves with intent. When they dismounted at the edge of his land, the leader stepped forward. His eyes were steady, not hostile, but searching. He spoke calmly, asking for shelter, not as beggars, but as men seeking respect. Samuel's instinct told him to guard his home, to refuse strangers whose lives he did not understand. Yet something in the leader's voice, firm but weary, tugged at him. He saw in their faces the same resilience that kept him alive through countless lonely winters. Against his hesitation, Samuel nodded and opened his gates. That night, his quiet ranch was filled with unfamiliar sounds, low conversations in a tongue he did not know, the crackle of a larger fire than his usual, and the laughter of men who had fought and bled together. Samuel sat apart at first, watching, unsure of what to make of it all. He wondered if he had made a mistake, but as the days unfolded, the warriors proved themselves respectful. They tended to their horses, helped mend fences, and worked alongside Samuel with a silent understanding that labor was a universal language. In time, Samuel learned fragments of their story. They were not conquerors nor invaders. They were men caught between a past that was slipping away and a future that offered little promise. They sought only a place to rest, to gather strength, to remember who they were. In their eyes, Samuel began to see reflections of his own loneliness, displacement, loss, and a yearning to belong. Still, trust was not built overnight. There were moments of tension, nights when Samuel lay awake with his rifle close by, unsure if his hospitality would be repaid with betrayal. There were days when he caught their guarded glances, as if they too wondered whether this solitary rancher might turn against them. But hardship has a way of binding people together, and soon fate gave them a chance to prove what they truly meant to one another. One stormy evening, riders from a nearby town arrived. They carried suspicion and anger, their voices sharp with prejudice. They warned Samuel that his land was no place for outsiders and demanded that the warriors leave at once. Samuel felt the weight of their eyes, waiting to see where his loyalty lay. In that moment, the years of solitude pressed down on him, but he realized he had already made his choice. Standing tall on his porch, he told the townsmen that his land was his to decide, and that those who sought peace under his roof would find it. The confrontation nearly came to blows, But Samuel's unflinching resolve and the silent strength of the warriors beside him forced the intruders to retreat. After that night, something shifted. No longer was Samuel just a lonely rancher, and no longer were the 10 warriors simply strangers. They had shared risk, stood together when division threatened, and found in one another the beginnings of trust. Slowly, language barriers softened with effort. Around the fire, Samuel began to share stories of his past, of a wife long gone, of children buried too soon, of years swallowed by silence. In return, the warriors shared their own tales, of battles fought, of families scattered, of traditions clung to despite the world's attempt to erase them. As weeks turned into months, the ranch came alive in a way Samuel had nearly forgotten possible. Work was shared, meals were communal, and laughter returned to the land. Where once the house echoed with emptiness, now it carried voices that wove together into something resembling family. Samuel found himself not only needed but valued. The warriors, in turn, found that respect was not limited to their own people. Sometimes, it could be discovered in the most unexpected of places. But as all things in life, this chapter was not meant to last forever. The warriors eventually had to move on, their journey unfinished, their people waiting. The morning of their departure was heavy with unspoken words. Samuel walked with them to the edge of his land, where the earth met the horizon. They clasped hands, not as host and guests, but as brothers forged through shared struggle and understanding. The leader, before riding away, told Samuel that he had given them more than shelter, he had given them dignity. As the dust of their departure settled, Samuel stood alone once again, but he was no longer the same man who had once lived in silence. His ranch carried echoes of voices that would never leave him. His heart, though still scarred, was no longer empty. He had discovered that solitude need not mean loneliness, and that trust, though risky, could bring healing. In the end, the story of Samuel and the 10 warriors was not one of chance. It was a reminder that human beings, no matter how different, are bound by the same need for respect, for connection, for a place to belong. And as the sun dipped behind the hills once more, Samuel sat on his porch, a quiet smile on his face, knowing that his life would never again be defined by silence.